months ago, I was traveling to Orlando, Florida. I was going to give a speech, and I remember I came on the airplane, I sat down, and I found my seat. I was seated next to a woman who I would have described as a business executive. She looked the part. She had on a great business suit, she had her laptop open before we even took off, she was in business mode. I, on the other hand, that day, I was wearing a t-shirt, shorts, and flip-flops. I probably looked like I was headed to the beach or to Disney World, and as I sat down, she started the conversation probably the way that most people would start a conversation in that situation. She said, "Are you headed to Orlando for business or pleasure?" And I said, "I'm headed for business. How about for you?" And she said, "For business." And then she said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm a keynote speaker. I'm speaking at an association conference tomorrow." And then she looked me from head to toe, and she asked me a very blunt question. She said, "Why in the world would anyone hire you to speak to them?" I was kind of offended for a minute, and I looked at her and I said, "'Cause I'm amazing?" And she laughed, and we had a great conversation. I'm actually speaking for her company soon. The reason I tell you that story is as we begin this conversation here today, I want to start with a really blunt question for you. Why in the world would anyone be influenced by you? Why would they choose to do business with you? Out of all of the agents, all of the advisors that exist in the world, why would they choose you? The truth is everyone in this room is an influencer, aren't you?
Yeah.
We all have influence. And as we learn how to connect with people better and communicate more effectively, our influence and our impact will grow, and because of that, our businesses will grow as well. Now, over the last couple of days, you've heard incredible speakers. You've gained great insights, you've laughed, you've cried, and my hope is that we can take all of what you've learned, all of this energy, and you can take it home with you so that you can have a bigger impact in the lives of the people that you serve. If we're going to understand influence, we need to understand what business you're actually in. I don't mean life insurance, I don't mean financial services, because the business that you're actually in, the business that all of us are in, is the people business, isn't it? We're in the people business. Every day, at work, at home, at play, you're in the people business. You interact with people, you engage with people, you network with people, you present to people. And so for you, learning how to win in the people business is paramount. What I want to do today is share with you two simple ideas that will allow you to connect better and communicate more effectively with people and therefore win in the people business. So the first idea is this. I want you to begin to invest in people. Now that's an interesting phrase. When you think about the idea of investing in people, let me tell you where it came from for me. When I was a teenager, when I was in high school, I got involved in a business program they have in the United States called DECA. DECA is a great program for high school and college students where kids from around the country compete in business competitions. First at the district level, then at state, and eventually at nationals. And I chose to compete in the entrepreneurship category, which meant that I had to conceive of a business, I wrote out a business plan, and then I presented it to judges who are acting as venture capitalists, trying to convince them to invest in my business. So this was like the non-TV version of Shark Tank, if you've seen that show before. Well, I competed in that competition, and I ended up winning the district competition. And then I won the state competition. And I went to the national competition. Out of 10,000 kids who competed, I took second place in the national competition. Now that was a great experience, but I'll tell you the thing that I remember most is not standing on stage. What I remember most was what happened after my final presentation. I was across the table from 3 judges, and as I finished, a prominent businessman who was the head judge, he walked around the table with his business card in hand, and he handed it to me and he said, "Ty, that was really impressive." He said, "I want you to call me because I want to invest in you." Now I was flattered, but as an 18-year-old kid, I kind of laughed. And I said, "Oh, shoot. I hope this doesn't affect my score, but I'm not actually planning on starting this business. This is just a competition. I don't know if I'm going to do it." And then he said something that I don't think I understood at the time. He said, "That's okay." He said, "I've found that I get my highest return on investment when I invest in people, and I want to invest in you." You see, as an 18-year-old kid, when I heard the word invest, the only thing that came to mind for me was money. But I don't think that's what he meant. Because the more I've thought about it, When you invest in people, what do you invest? You invest care, you invest time, you invest understanding, you invest yourself, don't you? You give a little bit more of yourself, you go above and beyond, and those investments in people, they change the nature of relationships. I think as I'm talking about this, I'll bet everyone in this auditorium can think of someone who's invested in them, can't you? You can think of somebody, a boss, a friend, a coworker, a mentor, a teacher, someone. Here's my question. If that person called you today and they said, I need your help, would you not move heaven and earth to help them? You see, I would call that influence, because that's what happens. When you invest in people, you grow your influence, because what actually happens is when you invest in people, people want to invest in you. It's reciprocal. It's how we're wired. It's in our DNA as human beings. It's called the law of reciprocity. Have you heard of the law of reciprocity before? The law of reciprocity says we want to reciprocate. So if somebody does something nice, you want to do something nice back. If somebody punches you in the face, you want to punch them back, right? That's just how we work. I'll give you an example. How many of you have ever received a birthday present from somebody you didn't really know? Weren't you like, oh crap. When's your birthday, right? Because you feel obligated. You have to give them a birthday present too. One of my favorite studies ever, this social scientist, his name was Robert Cialdini. He was studying the law of reciprocity, and he wanted to measure it. He wanted to see if this actually worked, and he came up with a funny idea. It was November. He pulled open the phone book. He chose 80 random people out of the phone book, and he sent them Christmas cards. Just 80 random Christmas cards, total strangers. Guess how many people out of 80 sent Christmas cards back to a total stranger? 62. 62 people sent Christmas cards back to a guy they don't even know. I can only imagine they're sitting there going, is this your cousin? Is this my cousin? I don't know, he sent us one, so we better send him one, right? That's how it works. So guess what? When you invest in people, people want to invest in you. And I remember learning that lesson as an 18-year-old kid from that judge. And at age 21, my brother Scott and I started a business together. We were young entrepreneurs, and we were struggling to get our business to take off. And I remember going back to this lesson and thinking, what if I can invest in them? How can I stand out? I'll bet everyone in this room thinks about that every day. How can I stand out? What can I do to add value? How do I make it so that people want to do more business with me? And so I began to invest and look for ways to be more valuable in their lives. And it changed things. We actually grew that business to over $25 million in annual revenue by the time we were 25. And in the process of doing that, we learned the power of investing in other people. I remember having a conversation with a mentor, a friend of mine, and telling him about this idea of investing in people, and he said, that makes sense. I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, I've always believed that value precedes influence. Value precedes influence. I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, your job is to add value. Think about it, everyone in this room, your job can be summed up in 2 words, add value. Now there's a lot of ways that you can add value. You can add value by the knowledge that you share. You can add value by the skill that you bring. You can add value by simply listening. But the question for every leader today is, am I relevant? And do I add value? This same mentor shared with me a story. He said in the 1940s, there was a little boutique financial services company that was just getting started, and they hired a man named Louis Engel to be in charge of their advertising, to write newspaper ads for them. Because in the 1940s, everyone read newspapers. But in the 1940s, no one understood the stock market. It was a unique thing that only stockbrokers understood. And so Louis Engel looked at the competitive ads, and they were all about 50 words long. They were just a straightforward pitch. They would simply say, if you want to invest in the stock market, come to us, this is who we are. Well, Louis Engel came to his partners and he said, I want to write an ad that teaches people about the stock market. And they said, why would we do that? Why would we give that away? And he said, I believe that if we add value, we'll grow our influence. And so he wrote up the ad, he brought it to his partners, they decided to test it for 5 days. This is the actual ad that he wrote. It was titled, What People Ought to Know About the Stock and Bond Business. This is a little bit more than 50 words. This is an unbelievable piece of information, and in 5 days it generated over 600 leads. This is not our day and age. This is not a click on the link on your iPhone. This took some actual work. It was the 1940s. You had to cut it out of a newspaper, fill it out with pen and paper, put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it. It took some work. They continued to run that ad for the next 5 years, and it generated 9 million leads. And it turned this little boutique financial services company into the company you and I know today as Merrill Lynch. That happened because Louis Engel understood that when you invest in people, people want to invest in you. That happened because he understood that when you add value, you grow your influence. And that happened because he understood something that was as true in the 1940s as it is true today, and that is that business is about relationships. So if you want to grow your relationships, invest in people. The second idea I want to share with you is how to communicate effectively. I believe that one of the most underrated skills in business is the ability to tell stories. Storytelling is such an effective skill because people remember stories. People engage with stories. And stories evoke emotion in people, which causes them to take action. That's what influence is. It is about moving people to action. And so understanding and telling stories effectively should be something you do every day. You should be telling your story. You should be telling client success stories. Storytelling is an important skill. Let me give you my definition of a story. A story is a reimagined experience, narrated with enough detail and feeling to cause your listener's imagination to experience it as real. What does that mean? It means if I tell a story, I want you to feel it, experience it, and therefore be willing to act on it. And if I can do that effectively, that story becomes influential. So here's the foundation for influential storytelling, and this is crucial. You don't retell a story, you relive a story. Because when you relive a story, you automatically invite other people in to relive it with you. And so I want you for just a minute to think about some of the stories that you tell. Take a client success story that you would tell. I want to teach you how to bring the audience into that story. Not to change the story, but to change the experience they have in hearing the story. So I'm going to teach you 3 techniques, 3 simple ideas. The first technique to bring the audience into the story is I want you to to place them in the scene. When you place someone in the scene, you can do it one of 2 ways. You can say, if you had been there when, or use the word imagine. Imagine being here. You see, when you place someone in the scene, they automatically start to see it around them, they picture it, and therefore they experience it. Let me give you an example. I could tell you a story where I could say, if you had been sitting in my office with me, the first time I ever had to interview somebody, I don't know if you've done this, I was so nervous. I'm sitting behind my desk, my knees are shaking, I don't know what they're going to say. Okay, just stop right there. What are you picturing? Are you sitting behind the desk? Are you seeing the office? All I had to do to place you in that scene was say, if you had been in my office with me. And so I physically place you in the scene so you can see it. The second technique is this. I want you to create curiosity. Curiosity is a storyteller's best friend, and here's why. I have to tell you the truth. It's kind of a hard truth. Nobody cares about your story. Not even your mom. Nobody at all. Unless they see how it pertains to them. That's the truth. And so some people will just jump into a story, or some people will say, let me tell you my story. But in the back of our minds, we kind of think, why do I care? And so instead, what I want you to do is create curiosity on the front end of a story. You create curiosity by asking a you-focused question. You-focused question means the word you is in the question. So I'm going to tap into your world with a question, then I'm going to bring you into my world with a story. I would say something like, have you ever experienced this? And you say, yeah. And I say, interesting, because boom, and now I bring you into my story. Simple technique. Third technique is this. I want you to reinforce relatability. You reinforce relatability by having a conversational tone in the way that you speak. You say things like, have you ever felt that before? Can you imagine? The truth is, I don't speak differently to 10,000 people than I do to one person. I've been doing this the entire time. Have you noticed? Do you see how I just did it right there? Do you see how I just did it again? It's just a simple opportunity to create a conversation. Instead of talking at people, you're talking with people. Now, one more idea around storytelling. There's a model, there's a blueprint, a specific model that we need to use to make a story influential, and we screw this up too often. The model is struggle to solution. Struggle to solution. Here's how it works. You hook people with the struggle, and then you help them with the solution. There is something in our bodies, in our DNA, that we respond to struggle, to conflict, to challenge. It emotionally engages us. And the reason I say we screw this up is because in business, we tell solution to solution stories, don't we? They all sound the same. When somebody sits in front of you, we often tell the same story. We say, you know what, we're great, and we've always been great, and we'll always be great, and if you work with us, that'd be great. And most people are like, great. Because what's real about that? You want to know where I learned this lesson? My 3-year-old son taught me this lesson. My son, several years ago, wanted to hear Smurf stories. Do you guys know Smurfs? Smurf stories, they're all the same. There's a bad guy named Gargamel who almost catches the Smurfs, and then they escape. That's the premise of every Smurf story ever told. And I had been making up Smurf stories for my sons, and I was sick of it. I did not want to tell them another Smurf story. And they said, Dad, one more Smurf story. We'll never ask again. That's not true. But I told them the dumbest Smurf story ever told. I said, okay, the Smurfs woke up. It was Smurfette's birthday. The baker Smurf made a cake. They sang happy birthday. Okay, go to bed. And my 3-year-old son said, that's not a story. There's no bad guy. And I said, what? And he said, without a bad guy, it's not a real story. It doesn't count. I want a real story. And he was right. And I just wonder if there's sometimes you're sitting in front of a client and they're thinking, tell me a real story. Just be vulnerable, be real. Connect with me. Because stories do incredible things. You all have incredible stories to tell, but learning how to tell them well is a skill set, and it takes practice. Having worked with tens of thousands of people in your industry, spoken on stages like this all over the world on storytelling, I can tell you this, that in your industry, whoever tells the best story wins. And so it's a skill you should develop, because ultimately this is about influence. Now, as we wrap up this conference, I want to share one more story with you before I leave. At the end of World War I, there was a gentleman named Michael Dowling who was invited to go over to Germany to speak to a group of wounded soldiers. He made the trip over to Germany, and imagine the scene. Imagine walking into a room where you see dozens of young men lying on cots. Some of them were shot, some of them were amputees. Every one of them had lost hope in their eyes. Michael empathized with these young men. He was really emotional. So he stood back and he waited for his turn to speak. And when he was introduced to speak to them, he stood up in front of them and he started the speech by saying this. He said, I want you to know that anything is possible. I hope that you dream big dreams because you have a bright future ahead of you and the potential to achieve anything that you desire. Well, the soldiers weren't in very good spirits and they started to boo him. And the booing got so severe that Michael finally stopped. He grabbed a chair and he sat down. And then unexpectedly, he reached down and he removed his prosthetic right leg and he put it on the floor. And then he removed his prosthetic left leg and he put it on the floor. And he took off his prosthetic right arm and he removed his prosthetic left hand. You see, what the soldiers didn't know was that when he was 14 years old, he was riding on the back of a wagon in a snowstorm. And something happened, he fell off the wagon. By the time his parents realized he was missing and came back to get him, he had severe frostbite to the point that they had to amputate both of his legs, his right arm at the shoulder and his left hand at the wrist. Could you imagine what that would do to a 14-year-old kid? He empathized with those soldiers because he knew exactly what they were going through. He had lost all hope in his eyes too. But somehow, with an amazing attitude and the help of prosthetic limbs, he went on to lead an incredible life. He was married, graduated from college, he had 5 children, and he climbed the corporate ladder until he became the president of a successful bank in Minnesota. Now, sitting there, quite literally a stump of a man, he started his speech over again by saying the exact same thing. He said, I want you to know that anything is possible. I hope that you dream big dreams because you have a bright future ahead of you and the potential to achieve anything that you desire. To me, that's got to be the greatest speech that's ever been given. And his message is what I want to leave you with today. Anything is possible. I hope that each of you leave here with new insights and new energy, new ideas to go back and to serve people more effectively, to make a bigger impact in their lives, to be a force for good, to have greater influence, because the world needs you to do that. You make a huge difference in people's lives, and I wish you all the best in continuing to do that all around the world. Thank you so much for having me.
Very good.